As it happens today, the president's schedule included an Oval Office signing of a proclamation honoring the country's most famous civil rights leader, Martin Luther King Jr. Who would ever have imagined an occasion like that ending like this?
Mr. President, did you refer to African nations? You were shithole
Mr. President, are you a racist?
It's far from the first time the questions come up. Is the president a racist? But this time, his reportedly vulgar dismissal of African countries as incapable of providing worthy immigrants to the United States puts the question firmly in the context of an evolving immigration policy. Democratic Senator Dick Durbin was in the Oval Office when he says Donald Trump said things
which were hate-filled, vile, and racist. I use those words advisedly. I understand how powerful they are. But I cannot believe that in the history of the White House, in that Oval Office, any president has ever spoken the words that I personally heard our president speak yesterday.
Trump tweeted this morning that this was not the language used. Seeing that tweet, Durbin essentially called the president a liar.
It is not true. He said these hate-filled things, and he said them repeatedly.
Republican Senator Jeff Flake was in the room too and confirmed to reporters that Trump said what Durbin said he said. Two other Republican senators in the room said they didn't hear what was said. Republican House Leader Paul Ryan wasn't in the room but seemed not to give the president the benefit of any doubt.
I read those comments later last night. So first thing that came to my mind was very unfortunate, unhelpful.
During the election, Ryan said one Trump comment was textbook racism, but that he'd support him anyway. Not all Republicans were mealy-mouthed.
This is a pattern of racist statements. This is a man who made his name in the political world, doubting President Obama's American citizenship, saying that he was born in Kenya.
Right-wing columnist Ann Coulter, who's been critical of Trump on immigration lately, heard about his comments and tweeted, "He's trying to win me back." Former Ku Klux Klan Grand Wizard David Duke tweeted, "Hail Trump."
And Keith joins me now for more on what this actually means. Because, Keith, there's no doubt Trump's comments sparked a strong emotional reaction. But what are the hard political consequences here?
Well, you know, I think it's almost easier to see what's damaging about what Trump said when you strip away the vulgarity. Because then what you're left with is Trump saying, we don't want Africans in this country. And when you consider that there are millions and millions of African Americans whose ancestors were kidnapped and brought here as slaves and who've lived their lives here as families for hundreds of years, that's going to have a much clearer ring in their ear than it does in the ear of someone who looks like me. The other point I would make is that although Trump has said many times many things on the campaign trail and during the election campaign itself that were incendiary about immigration, very often he was talking about illegal immigration. These comments are really about describing an immigration policy that will reverse 50 years of immigration to the United States that was aimed at diversifying the country. And there'll be a lot of Republicans even across the country who will be shaking their heads and thinking, boy, that's a short-term strategy.
Right. And Keith, just hang on there, because in just a moment, I do want to ask you about that larger puzzle that this latest incident fits into. Because, as you say, I mean, the whole story doesn't exactly come out of left field. It's all part of a years-long pattern of racially charged controversy.
When Mexico sends its people, they're bringing drugs, they're bringing crime, they're rapists.
Of course, there are Trump's first statements upon entering the presidential race.
And some, I assume, are good people.
But Trump has long seemed obsessed with crime committed by minorities. For instance, the so-called Central Park Five. Men, 4 black, 1 Hispanic, accused in the 80s of a violent rape.
You better believe that I hate the people that took this girl and raped her brutally.
Long after they were exonerated by DNA evidence, Trump still said they were guilty. Trump's also promoted the so-called birther movement that believes Barack Obama is secretly African, not American, and should have been barred from the presidency.
He gave a birth certificate. Now all we have to do is find out whether or not it was real.
On the campaign, he initially refused to denounce David Duke after the former head of the KKK endorsed him.
I know nothing about David Duke. I know nothing about white supremacists. And so you're asking me a question that I'm supposed to be talking about people that I know nothing about.
But of course, that's hard to square. In years past, Trump had publicly displayed knowledge of Duke in statements and interviews. He's posted controversial tweets, sometimes from accounts that feature white nationalist or Nazi themes. Then there's last summer's deadly violence in Charlottesville, Virginia, at the hands of white nationalists. He was criticized for seeming reluctant to condemn them.
But you also had people that were very fine people on both sides.
So let's get back to Keith now, because Keith, you'd heard all those comments before. You've delved deep into the political phenomenon that is Donald Trump. Did this surprise you?
Well, you know, when I first started covering Trump's campaign in 2015, I knew about the birtherism part of his biography, but I was surprised at that time to discover how white nationalist groups, white supremacists, even neo-Nazis, had been hearing a message from Trump for a long time, and they thought that he was their guy. And through the course of time, I think that's become kind of an accepted thing, that Trump has had this underground appeal to that segment, that fringe segment of society, and that it's actually larger than people had expected. I think it's understood now. Whether Trump is a racist, I don't know. I can't see into his mind, but I think it's pretty clearly established that, as from a political analysis point of view, he's a racial opportunist. We've seen it over and over again, so we shouldn't be surprised by what's happened now.
Keith Bogue in Washington, thanks.